Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Guys Who Stare at Stats. Cade Kennedy with you alongside Tyler Riggs. As week 10 of the college football season has come and gone, we are starting to get into November. The playoffs are almost here. That first playoff poll, at least the playoff push, completely underway. As always, a fun time for the sports. So you're not going to want to miss anything. Before we fully get into it, Tyler, feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below. It doesn't seem like a lot. It only takes maybe a minute or two of your day, but it does mean a lot to us. We're currently, 92 subscribers. We're 8 more away from 100. Can we get to 100 before the end of the season, or better yet, the end of the year? It's going to be a challenge, Tyler. I believe we can get there. I have faith that we can make it.
I think we can. And you know what I want to see comment-wise this week? And I think I want to see going forward. It would be really fun. So we can talk about it on the preview maybe a little bit. We'll get some good ones. We have that Champions of Life / Frauds of the Week segment. Give us your Champions of Life, your Frauds of the Week. Lay it in there. We want to hear about it.
Yeah,
let us know.
It'd be a lot of fun to see, what all is going on. There might be something we miss, something that we don't, put necessarily on our radar. But Tyler, let's just get right into this. The massive game in Happy Valley, Ohio State beating Penn State in a game that, let's be fair, very ugly at times. It was a classic Big Ten football game. Ohio State only scoring 20 points. But when you've got a good defense, sometimes that's all you need, Tyler.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about in the preview that this could be that way. This could be one of those games where at the end of the day, you're like, oh, man, this was not, great football, that it was kind of that more classic Big Ten game. And that's what it was. Both quarterbacks had their mistakes. Both defenses made some big plays, obviously. At the end of the day, Ryan Day gets the big win, Cade. That's, it was kind of a rock and a hard place between, okay, who's going to actually win the big one, Ryan Day or James Franklin? Ryan Day, at least this time, gets it done.
Absolutely. And it was one that, we had talked about it. Ohio State, as weird as it is to say they're going to live by Will Howard, they're going to die by Will Howard. In the first quarter, man, did it look like they were going to die by Will Howard. You throw that pick six early on in the game, play was just absolutely rocking. It's one of those, a lot of people try to do that. This feels like the year that Penn State's going to do it. And that felt like the moment of, okay, if Penn State can capitalize one more time after this and really get Ohio State on the ropes, they would have momentum 100%. Everything would be rolling their way. And Penn State couldn't do that. And what happens when you leave the door open for a highly talented team, a high-powered offense like Ohio State? That door's going to open. The opportunities are going to present themselves. Ohio State eventually gets back into the game. They take the lead. They get another mistake handed to them, Penn State does, with the Will Howard fumble into the end zone that turns into a touchback. Everyone's favorite rule in football. Everyone loves it. There's definitely never been a debate about that.
Yeah, no.
But either way, that gives Penn State another break there, another turnover, and Penn State just couldn't do anything. This turns into a field goal war in the second half. Penn State has to go forward with 5 minutes left on a 4th and goal. And credit to the Buckeyes defense. Once again, they shut Penn State down. I think the highlight of the game, you look at, what's the big stat to look at? It's Penn State's rushing attack. Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, 2 amazing running backs, 18 combined carries for 42 yards. Absolutely going nowhere. A little over 2 yards a carry. That was absolutely it. Compared to Ohio State, Quinshon Judkins, 14 carries for 95. He's averaging nearly 7 yards a carry by himself. Ohio State able to control the running game there. And when you control the running game in the Big Ten, you're usually going to win the game.
Yeah, and for the Ohio State defense, they've got to feel probably the best about this one, right? Just because you gave up so many big plays and gave up a lot of efficiency to the Oregon offense. And that lost a few weeks back, and you come back in this one, another big road test, and you're able to really buckle down and be the reason your team won. That's got to feel really good for that Ohio State defense. Give a little bit of that confidence back. Say, okay, we can be that team that shows up in the big moments.
Absolutely. And I mean, this sets up nicely for Ohio State now. You got your big win under you. You're looking good. Your only losses, by 1 point at the number 1 team in the country in Oregon. We'll talk about that a little bit more when the playoff ranking stuff comes out. But Ohio State's path perfectly in front of them. They got a big win, even with all their mistakes, and I talked about this a little bit in the AP poll reaction video. it doesn't matter. When you win a big game like this with the mistakes you had, that just looks almost even better for you. That you shot yourself in the foot and still played great enough to win the game.
Yeah, and you got to count on some of those mistakes, right? If you are a in a heavyweight fight like this, you got two top five teams like that. You got to know that okay, it's not going to be perfect, and you just got to be able to come out on the other end of it. And credit to Ryan Day and Ohio State, they did it.
Absolutely. Just a big win for the Buckeyes. But Tyler, this was the only kind of normal game that we're going to talk about for games of the week here because everything else went absolutely haywire. As you
It
can
was
tell
an
by
odd week, yeah.
yeah, it turned into, and I don't know who flipped the switch on wherever, but whenever we got to the night games, things went absolutely buck wild. And the best game to describe that, I think, was South Carolina not just beating Texas A&M. This was a game that it looked like South Carolina, okay, they score on their opening drive. Horrible start for Texas A&M. It's okay, they'll bounce back. We'd put this on upset watch for a reason. But then South Carolina, what do? They get an immediate stop. And when you get a stop, whether it be a turnover or not, it doesn't matter how you get one. Momentum's already in your way. Willie Bryce is rocking at night. Horrible place to play at if you're the opponent. South Carolina scores again. And it's 14-0, 8:24 to go in the first quarter. And that place about became unhinged right there. Texas A&M, to their credit, rallies back, ties the game up going into halftime. And I mean, the win probability chart really shows everything. You get to halftime, okay, Texas A&M has an opportunity to get something going, but then Rocket Sanders, a 52-yard run, and Texas A&M wasn't out of the game after that. They were still competitive the entire third and most of the fourth quarter. But South Carolina eventually started to pull away, and then forcing a turnover again at the end. And then this turned into, if you just check the box score, what looks like an absolute blowout, 44-20.
Yeah, and the sad part of this, Cade, just as we were talking and singing the praises of Mike Elko and what he's doing to turn around the culture here at Texas A&M, this felt like one of the Jimbo losses where you're on the road, hey, you walk in, you take care of business, you keep moving against a team that it's got some talent, but as long as you come out and take care of business early, you control the game. And they just didn't do it. It was just never there. And you're going, wait, where is that competitiveness that we've seen? Where is that talent that we've seen? Over the first 8 games for this Texas A&M team, and it just never appeared. I mean, credit to Coach Beamer and the South Carolina bunch. They've been competitive in some of those losses where, a couple different plays, we could be talking about South Carolina a different light. Even with this win, I mean, look at 2 of their losses. You lose a tough one to LSU early in the season, your second conference game. You barely lose against Alabama. Other than that Ole Miss loss, I mean, could be sitting here talking about a 7-1 South Carolina team.
Yeah, and that was the whole kind of story it felt like going into this game. South Carolina was one of those, I guess you could make the argument, and I think this probably showed it, maybe the best 4-3 team in the country. I know that's kind of a joke argument to make. We've seen before.
That's a little Nebraska, yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, they proved it. When you've got an NFL caliber D line like they have, we're able to roll out and shut people down like they're able to. They proved it again. They were able to jump on LSU. They eventually blew the lead with some maybe questionable officiating. I can't officially say that, but, wink, wink. And then the Alabama game where they were in it, like you said, South Carolina is not a bad team. They haven't been a bad team all year. Their record is not what they indicate. Shane Beamer, just what a statement win once again for the program to show that he still is the guy for South Carolina. You talked about it with us mentioning Mike Elko and how he fits down there. Beamer fits at South Carolina. He's a guy that perfectly, I think, represents them. Everyone wants to play for him, rallies around that guy because he can deliver big results like this.
Yeah, and I think the only complaint from the fan base is you just wish it was a little more consistent. That's probably his only big knock.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just incredible because how this game developed where just you talk about a battle of momentum swings in the first half, but South Carolina just able to really get that run game going. I mean, look at this. Rocket Sanders, 20 carries for 144, 2 TDs, had the big 52-yard run. Lenore Sellers, who only went 13 for 27 passing, but still was able to sling it for 244, 2 TDs, add 106 and a TD on the ground. both Sellers and Sanders running for over 7 yards a carry. This is a Texas A&M defense that was one of their strengths, was stopping the run and running the ball. They're usually a very physical team, but South Carolina just came out and punched them in the mouth repeatedly, time and time again. Texas A&M kept trying to go for it on 4th and 1 at their own 34, and South Carolina stopped them multiple times, and that was another big point in the game that just felt just weird. I don't know if you felt it the same way, Tyler, but every time A&M did it, it just left me scratching my head. Why would you go for it on 4th and 1, your own 34, especially early in the game when they did it? I get trying to set the tone, but that's not the time to do it.
Well, and that goes back to my point, of this felt like a Jimbo loss where you've got some of those head scratching decisions. You've got some points of the game where you're like, okay, they could have handled that a little bit better, and it was just some of those seemingly ghosts of the past kind of haunting Texas A&M in this moment. Not sure if it was desperation on the part of Elko or just, them not really wanting to give up some of that early momentum, but you do anyways, right? So I don't know where you point to in that, but that's why I made that point. It definitely felt like Jimbo was coaching this game and not Mike Elko.
But it just I don't want to say shocking loss, because there's the belief that South Carolina could win this game, but it takes the number 2 spot in my game of the week segment here because it just didn't feel like a 24-point smackdown was coming. This just felt completely out of left field. But either way, monumental win for South Carolina. And now for Texas A&M, Tyler, I've already seen people bring it up. How do you get rid of that, sinking feeling that, even though you're first place in the SEC coming into November, 8-4 still feels like it might be inevitable for Texas A&M.
Yeah, some of that, those ghosts creeping up on you, and your schedule isn't the worst when you look at it. You've got New Mexico State, which at home, SEC Network game should be an easy, obvious win, right? Um, but then you got to go to Auburn, which at times has been a team that, though 3-6, has proved to be a little bit competitive. And then you finish with Texas, so not the easiest road, I guess, with those last 2 conference games. And the big deal is you kind of lose control of your own destiny now. I mean, you still got a chance at it, right? You still have a chance to take down Texas, but you lose a little bit more of that security.
Absolutely. And that's not the only Texas team, though, we're going to talk about in games of the week, because we've got to move gears to the Big 12. Texas Tech beating Iowa State. You want to talk about maybe just a peak Big 12 game? I mean, let's just look at the stats here. Let me just scroll down to it, Tyler. If you would have told me Iowa State is going to have 432 to 366 in terms of total yards, they'd have 2 more first downs, same amount of turnovers with 2, and Iowa State would win the time of possession battle by 9 minutes, and Iowa State was going to score with 2:11 to go in the game, you would have thought, okay, Iowa State wins a gritty knockdown fight against an up-and-down Texas Tech team. Iowa State will surely find a way to get the job done and finally be 8-0 for the first time in school history, right? No, that's not at all what happened, because the Big 12 is a chaotic conference. Texas Tech able to win the game. Taj Brooks, fun running back to watch. If you haven't seen a Texas Tech game, you really need to. He runs it in. Texas Tech wins the game with 20 seconds to go, and Iowa State is now in a fight for their life in the Big 12 championship contending race.
Yeah, like we talked about with Texas A&M, another game where the fans are looking at their coach and saying, not again, right? We've seen Iowa State in previous years have some of these situations where it looks like it's finally time and they can't capitalize late in the season. And this was a classic one of that. They just make enough mistakes to lose the game. Overall, you don't think they play horrible, but they make enough mistakes to lose the game. And that's not what champions do. And it seems like Iowa State just can't get out of their own way in those big moments.
No,
Chance to go 8-0, like you said, and you can't get it done.
yeah, and it's one of those that, we've talked about Matt Campbell before, where is Iowa State still going in the right direction? Absolutely. And one game isn't going to derail that. But now it's, how does Iowa State respond from a moment like this is going to be the big question going forward for them. They have Kansas on not the road, technically a neutral site in Kansas City, but on the road at Kansas there. It's going to be weird to see how they respond, if they can get up for that one pretty easily or not. But this is a Texas Tech team that had been on a downhill slide, had been beaten up by Baylor 59-35. And I think if you're an Iowa State fan, you got to be scratching your head that Baylor was able to run all over these guys. Why couldn't we? What went wrong enough to the point in a game where it was raining too? Typically, you'd think a rainy, wet day would favor a team that wants to run the ball like Iowa State can. But instead, it turns into Rocco Beck throwing the ball 39 times. He throws it for 299 and 2 touchdowns in a game where both quarterbacks had their good moments at times. You saw a lot of good. You saw some bad. Just an overall up and down game between a team you expect that from and a team you haven't expected it from this year.
Yeah. And well put, Cade. As I texted you after the loss, what I say, believe in the Cougs, baby.
Yeah,
BYU sole possession of first place in the Big 12 now.
Yeah, which is, I mean, this was, we'll talk about it a little bit more when we get to some of the other Big 12 action. It feels like this was a big week for Colorado fans where they did nothing, and now they're right back in the Big 12 title race. We'll get to the other games that led to that down the line, but we've got to get to the next one, Tyler. The third of the Texas trio here for games of the week. SMU, a 48-25 smackdown of Pitt in a game that wasn't even that close. It was 48-11 with 10 minutes to go in the ball game. SMU just did absolutely whatever they wanted in this one, which is crazy because the total yardage was only a 14-yard difference. We talked about that in the preview. These teams average almost the same amount. Pitt had 2 turnovers. SMU just went, pound for pound the better team. I mean, just, whatever blow they took, they were able to dish it back twice as hard. SMU just looked like the better team and proved to everyone who, if you didn't believe in them, they are an ACC title contender.
Yeah. I mean, this was, we kind of talked about it, of what the potential is for.
Oh, seems like we lost you there for a moment, but there we go.
Team going forward needed this one. Actually, not only there we go. Okay. Anyways, as I was saying, for this SMU team, a moment where you needed a win to stay in that ACC race, and not just stay in the ACC race, but completely throw it into chaos. And with some other results, you did that. So that was big. And we talked about this, Kate, in the preview, that this team, for whatever reason, knows how to, at least this year, go in there and find a way to overpower in these bigger matchups, right? They're not afraid to get into some shootouts, some back and forth, and SMU just absolutely went in there and kind of opposed their will.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, I think we mentioned the key to this game, or at least on the SMU side of things, was Brashard Smith. Can you get him going? These are 2 equally talented, the top 2 rushing defenses in the ACC. Pitt only got 3.2 yards per carry, 103 yards on the ground. Smith had 161 by himself, and SMU finished with 161. They had 13 combined carries from everyone else for a whole 0 yards. He was the entire rushing offense. And then Kevin Jennings, just playing a phenomenal game, 306, 2 touchdowns. And keep in mind, this is all without their star tight end. This is all without R.J. Maryland still going on for SMU. There's a reason they jumped up 7 spots in the AP poll today, up to 13. SMU is really starting to look like the real deal, hitting their stride now. And for Pitt, I mean, this was one that, I saw several Pitt fans, at least, on social media, where they're just like, are we frauds? Was this entire team just accidentally 7-0 somehow? How good are we really? And I think that's going to be one of the takeaways from this. Is this more of a how good is SMU versus how bad is Pitt? I don't think Pitt's a bad team. I think they're still an okay, good team. I think it just shows this is where SMU is at when they bring their A game, which they did obviously here.
Yeah, and for Pitt, you got some chances to continue to prove that you might still be a legit team. You got Clemson, Louisville still ahead, and Louisville, boy, what a one they got. We'll talk about that in a minute. But for SMU, I mean, when they get rolling, and you mentioned whatever the stats say, you get all the contributors piling in. They're not even fully healthy in that sense. This might be a team we got to start talking about as a legit contender for the playoff game.
Absolutely. We're going to have to see how this thing develops down the stretch. But the final game to get to. It's an upset that we both called. If you looked at the picks, obviously had technical issues. Audio was completely messed up there. Unfortunately, could not get the preview video out. I got the post up, though. If you go to that, it's written in stone that we both predicted this. Minnesota beating Illinois 25-17. Minnesota was the Vegas favorite as well. And the Golden Gophers, I mean, Tyler, we got to start talking about Minnesota. They're 6-3 now. They got the big win under their belt. This is a Minnesota team that continues to find ways to win. They've looked good over the past few weeks. They're riding that momentum. PJ Flex got them rowing the boat once again out at Minnesota. A team that's really turning into something special to watch again, Tyler.
It is. And, we'd mentioned in the preview when we had tried to talk about it, as you pointed out, just they'd started to really maybe find some stride, find some identity, in the past few weeks, and they were kind of riding that. And again, did it right here, and you gotta give credit to Fleck because there's not a guy in the country that say what you will about him. He is one of those that when seemingly all things are lost, they could find a way back. And was it their prettiest game? No. Darius Taylor had a fantastic effort. Obviously, you were able to get Luke Altmaier uncomfortable enough to be able to slow up their offense, and that's all you needed. Altmaier losing a couple of those fumbles, you forced those big turnovers, and it was a really good job by Minnesota to walk into that road environment, handle the challenge, and close the deal.
Absolutely. I think that is the big stat of the day. The 2 fumbles by Luke Altmaier. We've talked about Illinois enough on this show that you know what I'm about to say, Tyler. The key to beating a team like Illinois who wants to play solid defense, run the ball, you've got to get to Altmaier. If you can make him, throw an interception or fumble the ball a few times, you've got to get to him a little bit as that kind of game manager position. Start making him second guess himself. If you can do that, you've got a really good shot to win the day. Minnesota's a well-coached team. They did exactly that, and they won the game. It's sometimes, Tyler, it's as simple as that.
It is. It is. So now for Illinois, you gotta do some soul searching, right? You're bowl eligible, but man, you really like to finish the season strong. There's still a chance for them. Obviously, you're kind of out of the Big Ten race at this point, but you got Michigan State, Rutgers, and Northwestern to end the season. All like I would say winnable games for sure.
Absolutely. And for Minnesota, the fun stat of the day for them, this is the first time that Brett Bielema has lost a game to Minnesota. Remember, head coach of Wisconsin for a while, now at Illinois. Minnesota finally gets their win over him. Every once in a while, Tyler, you get a fun stat like that, but it is finally time to get into Champions of Life of the Week and Fraud Alert. Maybe our favorite segment on the show. Some may say that. Many people are saying that. But, Tyler, we've got to get right into it. I'll start with my Champion of Life of the Week. It's Rice beating Navy. Now, you're probably wondering, really? This is your Champion of Life of the Week? Think about it. This is a Rice team that suffered through a 5-hour rain delay at home. Combined, all the rain delays, they had 5 hours, was half an hour away from breaking the all-time rain delay record. I didn't even know they kept records for all-time rain delays, Tyler. Apparently they do. This was a game where Pete Alamar's the interim coach here at Rice. This was his first game as the interim because Mike Bloomgren was fired for Rice being 2-6. And just a late night game that this turned into. This was the last FBS game on of the day, by the way. And they forced Navy into some uncomfortable positions. Navy had a couple of turnovers, and this is a stat you don't see often for Navy. Getting beaten on the time of possession, 31-29 when you round it. You would think, well, that's only being beaten by 1 minute. Navy being beaten at all is usually something you don't ever see. And this is a game where Rice just completely dominated. That's something you would not expect for a 6-1 Navy team at the time of the game to be just beaten up like that. Horvath, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions, held to 64 yards on 10 carries, did have a touchdown, but just absolutely nothing doing for the Navy offense.
Yeah, and really disappointing for Navy here because it puts you, pretty much out of the picture when it comes to the automatic bid potentially for that group of 5, right? Because now you've got Army, Tulane, top of the conference ahead of them. And you don't really have that opportunity down the stretch now to make, I think, a big enough statement to try to claim it. This puts in a situation where even if Boise State absorbs another loss, right? And let's say Navy is somehow able to get their way into that conference championship just because they do still have Tulane on the schedule. I don't think it's going to be enough, even if they went out now. So tough for them. I think this really, I mean, just after that Notre Dame beat down, you come back and you think, okay, let's get a bounce back here against a Rice team that, for all the reasons you laid out, kind of lifeless. And you didn't get that. You got an inspired Rice team, and Navy just didn't seem ready.
Yeah, and that's why Rice is my champion of life of the week. The amount of everything chaos going around the program where your coach gets fired, you've got an interim guy coming in, you've got to take on a Navy team that you know is going to come out mad after how they played against Notre Dame. To have all that going against you, then a 5-hour rain delay. Tyler, we've experienced some rain delay games, even just broadcasting where, obviously you probably playing and stuff like that too, but you know how hard it is to have to try to recuperate during one of those. I cannot imagine what it would be like as a player sitting in that locker room for 5 hours just trying to find something to do to kill time. But to have all of that come together for you to come out and still play not just a good game, but a great game against a good opponent, that's champion of life of the week quality no matter what.
Yeah, got to feel good for those guys at Rice. Congrats to them for that one.
Absolutely. But I've got one more champion of life of the week to get to, Tyler. Got to go to the Division II level for this
Oh,
because one of the greatest upsets, maybe in college football history, happened this week on Halloween, nonetheless, because of course it did. Southern Nazarene. 0-8 Southern Nazarene, one of the worst teams in the Great American Conference. Obviously, one of the worst teams in Division II football this year when you're 0-8. Taking on the number 3 team in Division II, Ouachita Baptist, who, keep in mind, had beaten defending champion and number 1 team in the country, Harding, a few weeks ago. Southern Nazarene does not score a touchdown until 24 seconds left in the game to win 18-17 to somehow pull off one of the most improbable, immaculate upsets you could ever imagine in this sport. Ouachita would have been a 30 to 40 point favorite if they did spreads on D2 games. And
I think it was 35 and a half.
Yeah, 35 and a half. That's the equivalent of usually an FBS playing an FCS, usually.
Yes.
That's how crazy it was here. And for Southern Nazarene, I mean, just an amazing game for them to come out and play that good. Cameron Van Pruyen, amazing name, by the way. Kicker, player of the game for SNU, 4 field goals that kept them in this the entire time. A game that you would look at and go, wow, this is one of those funny, weird games you get in Division II sometimes where Ouachita doesn't bring their A game. It's a Thursday night. It's Halloween. You might be thinking about other things. You're thinking, okay, 2 weeks away from the playoffs starting. Let's start to get going here. And then you lose focus, and a team like Southern Nazarene can rally together and say, we still are in this game. We have a shot to do something, and Southern Nazarene gets the job done. And a special note, Tyler, also, this is the 100th win in Southern Nazarene football D2 history. Ever since they moved to Division II about 12 years ago from NAIA, this was their 100th win. Their first win of the season, 100th program win as a Division II school against the number 3 team in the country. First time they'd ever beaten Ouachita Baptist. First time they'd ever beaten a top 5 team in Division II. You could not have scripted it any better for the Crimson Storm.
No, you couldn't have. And this is a conference that's kind of near and dear to us. Obviously, Northwestern Oklahoma State is in there.
The hat I wear every week on this channel.
Yes, GAC, I have claimed is the toughest conference in D2, if not the country. More evidence for that flame. Thank you, SNU, for giving us that little bit of extra credit there for that. But no, I mean, what a monumental win. And we know some of those guys on that SNU roster as well. So there's some of the younger guys, and to be able to get that type of win for a program that's trying to, kind of build up. Wow, that's huge. A rebuild, I should say. It's been pretty good in previous years, but to get that one, that's got to be monumental for those kids.
Absolutely. I mean, just a massive win for Southern Nazarene. But Tyler, I believe it's time for your champion of life of the week.
Well, I say I stole this from you. We had talked about it a touch. I've got to go with the boy that's a little under the radar, right? Maybe I wouldn't say the luster had kind of faded from him, but you drop a couple games, 5-3. People kind of forget about you after a loss. Give me Vanderbilt. Got done on the road against Auburn this past week to get to 6-3. The Commodores are going bowling for the first time in a while, and they have a realistic shot to finish with maybe 7. I would say 8. I mean, and 7's not guaranteed, but this is a Vanderbilt team that at the very least is not going to finish in the bottom of the conference where they have a lot of years previous. Feels good for Diego Pavia. What a fun guy to watch. Me and you both, part of that sicko side of things. I've watched plenty of him over his college career so far. You feel good for a guy like that that's worked so hard and to be leading a group to do the things they're doing. Really fun to see. So congrats Vanderbilt. Champions of life for me this week. Bowl eligible Commodores going bowling.
And also an upset, be a 7.5 point underdog for some reason.
Yeah, I forget about
going
that.
to Auburn, Diego Pavia is Hugh Freeze's father. It's confirmed. 3-0 against him all time. Beat him New Mexico State versus Liberty in 2022. New Mexico State versus Auburn last year. And now Vanderbilt versus Auburn this year. You now have a Diego Pavia Hugh Freeze trilogy that you can look at and laugh at Hugh Freeze for, which I might do one of these days when I get bored during the offseason. But just what a fantastic performance again for Vandy. Defense comes in, gets the one turnover on Auburn, shuts them down. And even though Pavia did not have an amazing day throwing the ball, you look at it, 9 for 22, 143, still had 2 touchdowns. Vanderbilt could not run the ball to save their life. The good news is their defense is good. They shut Auburn down. Auburn couldn't run it either. You rely on Peyton Thorne, who had a decent game to his credit, but Auburn just had nothing going their way almost this entire game. One of those very low-scoring games that usually in the past, if it would have been a different Vandy, they still would have, maybe found a way. You look and go, oh, hey, it's 7-7 at halftime. Maybe something funny will happen here. But with this Vanderbilt team, with how good they've been this year, you say, hey, 7-7 at halftime, Vanderbilt's going to win this game.
Yeah, that's exactly what they did. They have found ways to get some of those tough wins, and just really fun to see for them.
I mean, it's going to be fun to see Vandy in a bowl game. I mean, we cannot, Tyler, if we had A, the money, or B, the willpower, that'd be fun to go see in person. But
Tyler, willpower might be the stronger operator there, although the money is important as well. For
sure. I'm saying just either way, congrats to Vandy once again. The Diego Pavia journey continues. But Tyler, we've talked about the fun of the week, but we've got to get to fraud alert. And my fraud alert is simple as day. It's Clemson. What are we doing here? Louisville, a 33-21 win. And this isn't the fact that Clemson lost to Louisville, okay? Louisville's a good team. We've talked about them enough on this show that you know what we believe with Louisville. They're a good team. They've had to, unfortunately for them, play Miami, SMU, and Notre Dame. Those are 3 good wins. There's no shame in losing those games. For me, what puts Clemson on fraud alert? A lot of things. Louisville blocked 2 field goals. First of all, what is your special teams doing? That should not happen twice ever. It happens once, understandable. You got to change something to make sure that doesn't happen again. But this was a game that outside of the first quarter, Clemson just looked, dare I say, lethargic on offense. And I don't know if this is a combination. It's got to be a combination of Garrett Riley's play calling. I don't know what was going on with Cade Klubnik. He had some moments where why did you throw that? What are you doing? This Clemson offense just looked sad. I mean, it was pathetic. And then what puts them on fraud alert this week, especially, you're down 26-7 going into the fourth quarter. And keep in mind, Clemson finally does score in the fourth quarter on a 5-minute drive where they did not go no huddle a single time. There was a moment where Clemson fans are booing the offense because they're taking 30 seconds, 35 seconds. They're still in a huddle. They barely can even get the snap off without a delay of game being called. I don't know what you're doing in that situation, down 19 with under 8 minutes to go in the game, where you have to be hurrying and you just refuse to. You just put a line in the sand. No, we are just not going to try to win the game. I don't know why that was happening. I don't know what Clemson was thinking. Their fans certainly weren't happy about it. That led to an onside kick that Clemson might have recovered, but there was no way they were going to overturn it. Clemson tried to get a review. Fans threw trash on the field and bottles and all sorts of stuff, which that's the second week in a row that's happened now. And then Louisville scored one play later and just took all the air out of the stadium. Clemson, just a pathetic performance from their offense. Defense did not look great either, obviously. Giant win for Louisville. It's the first time Louisville's ever beaten Clemson in football, by the way, and to do it at Clemson as well, at Death Valley. Huge for the Cardinals. Nothing but compliments for them. But for Clemson, what in the world are we doing here? Just absolutely just devastating.
Oh man, it makes it a real mess for the ACC, right? I mean, they've got Miami and SMU solely atop, and I say a mess. It would have been probably more of a mess if Clemson won this game because you had that outside chance of being able to have three undefeated teams in terms of going into potentially a conference championship situation, which would have been awkward. So yes, the ACC's happy in that sense, but yeah, Clemson, boy, talk about a bag fumble, right? Because when you look at them coming into this game, you go, okay, they're starting to play, to a lot better standard. Their only loss was that opening game against Georgia, in which they got dismantled a bit, but first week of the season, you could forgive that. Maybe they're finding their way back, and then yeah, the bottom falls out against Team Louisville, okay, that we both thought in previous weeks lost some big opportunities to show that they were legit. So that's got to feel good for Louisville, but on the same side for Clemson, ooh boy, now you got a lot of questions. Dabo's back kind of under the microscope a little bit as well, I think.
Absolutely. And I mean, this is a game where, Phil Maffa, he did his job, 30 carries for 171 and 2 touchdowns. That's about the only guy that I can give praise for on the offensive side of the ball. Cade Klubnik throws the ball 56 times, 33 for 56, 1 touchdown. I mean, granted, Tyler Shuck 17 for 32, 156, didn't have a touchdown either. But it's one of those games where you should not be relying on Klubnik to throw the ball 56 times. I'm sorry,
No.
that should not be happening ever under any circumstances. He is not a guy that is designed to do that. But it's just
No, and
this is
especially any college quarterback in general, you don't have to throw 56 times. It's not a great strat.
no. I mean, it was just this was a
That's
head.
my
Yeah, this is a head scratching game. I don't know. And some of this is Louisville's defense. I don't want to turn this into just Louisville's a terrible team because they're not, and I can't express that enough.
legit. People forget about that.
Yeah, but it's just Clemson's offense looked pathetic in this game. I don't want to say, well, no, I am going to say they deserve to lose this game. This is just pathetic offensively. This felt like watching Oklahoma almost, dare I say, for a little bit, Tyler. But
Wow.
it was pathetic. It was
Yeah, the
sad.
Oklahoma
You score 7 points in 3 quarters, and Miami was able to score 52 on this team. Need I say more? I rest my case. But Tyler, that's enough about me ranting about Clemson's offense. I could go on forever with examples if I'd thought about this long enough. But
sounds like.
but Tyler, what did you have as your fraud alert for the week?
Oh, okay, the Big 12, man, right there with the ACC as a chaos conference, apparently. And Kansas State, what are you doing? You're on the road against Houston. You just had that should have lost game against Kansas, right? We're getting questionable officiating. Probably should have lost that game, but you escaped with the win, a chance to take care of business on the road before you get 2 home games where you're probably going to be favorite at that point. And man, you go out and just slop around and get beat by Houston. Now, we'll say this about Houston, Willie Fritz. Willie's been known to be able to coach up some teams, change some cultures, right? And we're starting to see that tide turn maybe a little bit with this Houston team. Didn't start the season great. All of a sudden now they've ripped off some big wins, but that's no excuse. You're the better team, Kansas State, and now you've left the door for Colorado to sneak into the Big 12 race. Obviously, Iowa State with their loss helps you out a little bit, but you have really put yourself behind the eight ball of any chance to try to maybe get into that Big 12 title game, unless more chaos could happen, which in the Big 12, I guess, now we know anything's possible.
Absolutely. And for me, what I think infuriates me more about this watching Kansas State, because thankfully was able to watch the entire second half of this when Oklahoma State game was on Fox, when the rain delay, so you get to see the entire second half of K-State and Houston. It's amazing how TV works nowadays. But
You just
just
shift everything around.
yeah, just Kansas State. It looked like they had their turning moment right before halftime. You get down 10-3. DJ Giddens scores. Yes, the PAT is blocked, but you get another opportunity to score right before halftime. You get a field goal to end the third quarter with a downpour going on in Houston, which was crazy that Houston was able to play, but Rice in the same city was in a 5-hour rain delay. I don't know how that worked out, but madness, I guess. But either way, this was a game where Kansas State had this game put away, Tyler. I mean, this was 19-10. Houston wasn't going to threaten again. They were just going to continue to run the ball and pray that they busted off a big run. Zion Chris was in. He had a perfect game, 11 for 11, by the way. But then Avery Johnson turns the ball over. And Houston gets a 9-yard drive to score and make this a ball game. And then it just turned into K-State playing as conservative as possible. Just, okay, let's get out of here. Let's get out of here. Let's get out of here. And you kept feeling that if Houston slowly keeps, in a punt war, if you can slowly get near midfield, you're going to have an opportunity to set up to do what they did last week, had a game-winning field goal against Utah. And I felt like that was what was going to be the end result. Once Houston got the ball around midfield, I thought, oh boy, here we go. Houston's going to try to win this thing, and they're actually going to get a shot at, which is going to be the craziest part. But that didn't happen, Tyler, because Zion Chris decided, I'm going to do this myself. 41-yard touchdown run. Just nobody there to stop him for Kansas State. A complete bust there. Runs by people, runs through people, whatever word you wanted to use to describe it. He was not going to get denied on that. And Houston took the lead. And you never got the feeling Kansas State was going to score again after Houston took the lead. You just felt that K-State, at least I did, that they just mentally checked out at the end of the third quarter, which I don't know why you would in a 9-point game, but it felt like they thought the game was over. There was another 15 minutes left to play. Houston took advantage. We were able to see Willie Fritz's Houston team in person. You could tell the progress was trying to get there, and now we're seeing it pay off. So a phenomenal win for Houston, but at the same time, if you're Kansas State, I don't know which performance is more pitiful for them. Out at Houston here or getting beat by 29 by BYU earlier in the year, because BYU is a legitimately good team. So you can kind of excuse that somewhat, but losing here is just simply embarrassing, Tyler.
It is. And some of those issues you mentioned, the kind of, I don't know necessarily gives up the right term, but just real lackadaisical at the end of that game, and that's not something that you would associate with Kansas State and their history being lackadaisical, being kind of lifeless, I guess you could say, right? And that was without a doubt the most disappointing part for me, at least in this, was seeing that happen. And then on top of that, the fact that it kind of, I don't know, gave some of that flashback to the BYU game where you connect some of those dots about, okay, maybe this isn't a team in Kansas State ready for the big time like a lot of people thought.
Yeah, and what I think is the shocking number to me is 50. Only 50 yards for DJ Giddens on the ground the entire game.
Got shut down. Yeah.
17 carries for 50 yards. Had the one touchdown, but that was it. When you shut him down and make the entire offense Avery Johnson, that's not going to work well. And he only had 18 yards on the ground. So you take away that run game, the read option component, which, again, in a rain game, you would think a team that likes to run the ball like K-State does, same problem Iowa State had. A team that likes to go downhill couldn't go downhill in the rain. And when you force Avery Johnson to throw the ball 39 times, when you're forcing him to try to sling it around and run for his life, you're going to get mistakes. He's still a young kid. He's going to throw interceptions. And you have to be able to stand up as a defense and say, okay, we're out here. We shouldn't have to be out here, but we are anyways. Let's get a stop and let's take control of this thing again. And that did not happen. And Houston was able to win because of it. Now the Big 12 race is even more wonky. It's BYU and everybody else now. because of Houston with the ultimate monkey wrench.
Yeah, but don't look now. Who knows? Big 12 could
Yeah.
all change next week. It is a wild conference. It'll be fun to watch down the last few weeks of the season.
Absolutely. We'll get to that in our preview because there will be some weird stuff that happens in the Big 12 knowing how that conference likes to work. But Tyler, it is finally time to get to the power rankings that we do, the top 5 for the Power 4 and the top 3 for the Group of 5. AP pull up on the screen. As always, Illinois and Missouri fell out this week. Vandy's back in. Louisville's in as well. Deserved for both of those schools. But Tyler, I talked to you about this a little bit last night into this morning as we're recording this on late Sunday night. I don't know if there really is a top 5 in college football right now. I can give you a top 3: Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia. Ohio State and Georgia, you can debate who is 2. I'm going to say Ohio State for now because of the big win they had. Georgia went back to head-scratching performance for 3.5 quarters against Florida. That's what I'll sell there with there. Oregon, number 1. Of course they are. They blew out Michigan like you thought they would. But getting to number 4 is where things get interesting. And I looked at every team that I considered for this 4 spot and for the 5 spot with Texas A&M. You know, maybe you don't want to be ranked in this. I put Texas A&M here and they immediately got beat up. So this might be the worst case for you. But number 4, you're going to enjoy this. I've got BYU. They've got the best resume, I think, of any of the teams. They're still undefeated. There's no bad loss. The K-State win doesn't look as impressive, but that SMU game, shutting SMU down to only 15 points, looks really impressive right now. Being able to do that in Dallas. I put BYU at 4. And for number 5, sometimes it's good to just run with the undefeateds. I've got Miami at number 5. The Louisville win looks better. Miami was able to take control of Duke. Yes, they were down double digits in that game, but for once, they didn't just try to win by 1 possession. They weren't in a fight for their life. They were able to blow Duke out at the end, get up by over 20. So for Miami, they're in that 5 spot for now.
I like it, Cade. I like it. So for me, I got to go Oregon, of course.
Yeah.
And then Ohio State, I guess. I still don't trust them, but give me Ohio State. You get the road win like that. I'll take Ohio State number 2. Georgia got a little weird there for a minute, but they ultimately pulled it out, so I can't penalize them for that. So that's that top 3. 4, Miami. The second half impressed me, so I'm going to go with them. And here's where here's where number 5 gets tough for me for a couple of reasons. Really like BYU. Believe in BYU. Believe in the Cougs, right? I think they've earned number 5, but you know a team that I also think has earned number 5 that right now sits outside the top 10 with what they've been able to do.
Who would that be?
Boise State.
Okay.
Boise State. I mean, their only losses to Oregon, and Ashton Jeanty scared the bejesus out of that crowd.
Yeah. They scored more points on Oregon in Autzen than Ohio State did. So
yeah, and so that's where I'm like, it doesn't feel right that Boise State's all the way back at 12, and it doesn't feel right that BYU is only at 9 because they've done what's asked of them. But I can understand why, at least from the AP standpoint, they've got a Texas, Penn State, Tennessee up there. But I feel like Boise State has earned that 5 spot. I want to put BYU there. But, man, for me, I think that's 5A and 5B. Give me BYU, Boise State in my power rankings.
Okay.
And with honorable mention to Indiana, just outside of it. Well, Indiana, again, we've talked about this.
Yeah.
People are going to be upset. They moved 5 spots. They're in the top 10, but they'll take care of themselves on that, right? You've got that chance against Ohio State. That's the one everybody's waiting on to fairly or not say, okay, is this a legit team or not?
Absolutely. When we do our bracketology video, we can get a little bit more into, what we think will go on with, what I think I'm going to start calling the Indiana question, because it's just they're in such a weird predicament. But that's a whole nother story for a whole nother video. Looking at the power ranking top 3 group of 5 teams, it's not going to change. It's still Boise State at number 1, Army at number 2, who deserves a lot of respect. Army does. You can backup quarterback, no Bryson Daly, still able to beat Air Force 20-3. Army 8-0. number 3 in total offensive efficiency, still number 1 rushing offense in America, 340 per game, number 1 scoring defense in America, only giving up 11.3 points per game. Army, still a well-oiled machine there. Number 3, I've got to stay with Tulane. I was vindicated. Navy lost. Memphis lost. You know who didn't? Tulane. They blow out Charlotte 34-3 on Halloween. Tulane, number 21 in total efficiency. If you haven't watched the Green Wave, this would be the week to do it. They play Temple. Darian Mensah at quarterback's going to light it up. Mekhi Hughes, fantastic running back, 11 TDs, over 1,000 yards rushing already this season. He's going to have a big day against Temple.
He should. And Tulane, fun team to watch. I give you that. Yeah, probably deserve that 3 spot. I'll go, of course, Boise. Go Army. But I can't give it to Tulane. They've got 2 losses. Yeah, I know. It's a good teams. But the OU loss doesn't look great right now. The Kansas State loss looks a little bit worse. I'm going to go back to Louisiana. They did lose. They got the big road win over Texas State earlier this past week. There's no shot this will actually happen, but the Raging Cajuns still undefeated in conference play. Only 1 loss on the season. Give me Louisiana for the 3rd spot.
Alrighty then. But we both got teams from the same state at least, so we mostly are in agreement, somewhat.
We're close. We're close to being in agreement there.
We're close, but the Heisman top 3, quickly taking a look at this, I still have no changes from last week, and it might be like this for a while until someone truly steps out and impresses me enough. Ashton Jeanty still going to be in my number 1 spot. 31 carries for 149, 2 touchdowns, 2 catches for 31 yards. If people can please stop stacking the box against Ashton Jeanty, we are trying to watch him see if he can actually break Barry Sanders' record. It's not helping. You can put 8 guys in there. You're still going to lose the game. San Diego State proved that. Number 2, I've got Dylan Gabriel. He was 22 for 34, 294 through the air, 1 TD there. Had a rushing touchdown as well against a stout Michigan defense. And then Cam Ward. Last week, it was a topic of debate. Didn't have any touchdowns, only 200 yards through the air. What gives against a terrible Florida State team? Well, he corrected that this week. 400 yards, 5 TDs through the air, 25 for 41 passing. He played fantastic. Travis Hunter, can't say anything about him this week because Colorado was on a bye. He's still in that 4th spot for me. Again, some of that's not his own fault. You can't blame a guy for getting injured. I just feel that'd be wrong to do that. What are you doing there? He sits comfortably in the outside of that top 3 in that 4 spot.
Yeah, as much as I hate to do this, Tash and Jetty, I think I got to go Gabriel number 1. We've talked about it. This is a quarterback award, right or wrong. And Gabriel's playing for the unanimous now number 1 team in the country in Oregon. He's looked just, pretty much almost every game spectacular, very little mistakes. Jeanty, as crazy as it is to say, Cade, has not helped his case the last 2 weeks, despite going for 128, 149 yards. Hasn't been his best effort. Still wild to say, and that's kind of unfair, I think, to a degree. But that's where we're at with this saying. He's going to have to break records, or Gabriel's going to have to fall off. And so I'll put Jeanty at number 2. For 3, Ward probably could even have a case to leapfrog Jeanty right now, just because of that incredible performance he had. I mean, that was something to see him be able to. Really, it was like a completely different player in the second half of that game. It was really something to behold. But yeah, I'll give Ward number 3, and he's right there. He's knocking on the Ward. And then Travis Hunter, like I said, I think that's a fair point to put him 4, just because if he continues to have big games down the stretch, both sides of the ball, and Colorado's knocking on the door, playing in that Big 12 championship game, then I think Travis Hunter is going to get a lot of hype as well for that Heisman race.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's going to be a big week for Travis Hunter. Colorado plays at Texas Tech. Big Noon's going to be there in Lubbock, even though it's going to be the middle of the afternoon game. Logic, I guess. Then Boise State will have a night game, which kind of hurts Boise State against Nevada there, because they're going to be going up against Bama LSU in the TV slot for the evening game there. But either way, going to be interesting to see how that race continues. Yours is probably more accurate in how it's going to go. Mine is more, what the fan wants. We want to see a
Absolutely.
guy from
Yeah.
Boise State win the Heisman,
Yes.
but
Yes.
unfortunately, the media bias of people who like watching box scores and not games will probably win the day. But Tyler, it is time to get to best of the rest, and there is not a lot to get to in best of the rest because, well, we kind of talked about everything already with all the upsets that turned into the games of the week. This felt like it would be a slow week, and it is definitely not one, and
Over.
this game
Yeah.
continued with it. Florida and Georgia. Georgia and Florida. Whoever you want to put in front, this was a crazy cocktail party at the absolute least. If you would have told me, Tyler, that DJ Lagway was going to get injured in this game, that Florida was going to have a 7-point lead at halftime and then lose it after Lagway was injured, I would have said, okay, you credit to Florida. They played a phenomenal first half. Injuries suck. I get it. It's Georgia. You played as well as you could. If you would have told me Florida was going to tie the game with 7 minutes left, my jaw hit the floor when it happened. Like, if you had a literal reaction cam of me, my jaw you would not be able to see it on the camera right now. That's how far it was to the ground. There was a moment where it looked like Georgia, I don't want to say they were in trouble in this game, but it felt like, okay, you've got that rivalry magic working. Is Georgia really about to do this? Carson Beck keeps throwing turnovers, had 3 picks in this game, 25 for 40, did not play well. Georgia's just such an up and down team this year, Tyler. It's so weird to see. And Aiden Warner, I mean, he tried. 7 for 22, 66 yards and a pick. He tried to do something, but ends up throwing a game-sealing interception after Georgia had scored. That puts it away. Georgia doesn't win comfortably, but they do win by double digits. Still a quality win, of course, for Georgia. But at the same time, man, if you're Florida, I think you'd come away with this just thinking of the what-ifs in this game.
For sure. I mean, tough for Billy Napier. That would have been a huge win. Maybe Florida fans are kind of thankful because he gets a win like that. He probably buys himself another
I
year.
think with the
I don't know if
performance they had, even just, hey, with a
oh,
third string quarterback, you played Georgia for 3.5 quarters. I think he might get another year anyway.
oh boy, don't upset the Florida fans, dude. Jesus. Um, but no, I think the biggest thing of this is I think we really got to have the discussion of Georgia like we got to talk about like Ohio State is. They're going to go as far as Carson Beck takes them in a similar manner that Ohio State will go as far as Will Howard could take them. Do you really trust either of those quarterbacks right now? I don't think you do. And
I
that's got to be uneasy for those fan bases, but that's where you're at, right? This is where you've settled into at this point. And if you're Georgia and Ohio State, you're both kind of uneasy, but you just got to root and hope for the best with those two quarterbacks.
yeah, Tyler, I trust Carson Beck about as far as I could throw him, and that is not very far. So it is one of those situations where if you would have told me Georgia, with the great defense they have, with the good running game they can have, with all the talent they have that is going to play at the next level, that it's going to come down to, is Carson Beck going to throw 2 interceptions or less, and that's going to determine your entire game for you? I don't think any Georgia fan would have expected that at the beginning of the year. And it comes
Yeah,
back to, and we've talked about this week after week after week now. When is Georgia going to play a complete game against a big team? They didn't do it against Texas. They definitely didn't do it against Alabama. They couldn't even do it against Kentucky. They couldn't do it here against Florida, which you get I get it's a rivalry game. Fluky things happen in rivalry games. But at the same time, you've got Ole Miss coming up. You should be able to handle business there. What's going to happen when you play Tennessee in a few weeks? Tennessee,
yeah,
does the exact same thing where they take the first half off. If you let them get into a game where it's 7-0 at halftime, you don't want to see what Tennessee's going to try to do in the second half. Your defense is going to stand up, but if Carson Beck throws 3 interceptions again, you don't know what's going to happen. It's going to be a nightmare for Georgia. And they've been, I don't want to say lucky because they are talented, but it's inexcusable for Georgia. And I think every Georgia fan would agree with that. It is inexcusable to put yourself in a game against a team you are way better than, and you have to continue to just hope and pray that your offense does enough to win the game. You should be able to win these games no problem.
Well, you're sounding like a pure Feinbaum calling right there, but I completely agree with you, right? Yeah, it's got to be unacceptable. I'm surprised Kirby Smart. I say that he might be coaching it, but when you got an erratic quarterback like you do, that just sometimes makes those head scratching decisions, that's a deal that coaching can't really cover up sometimes, you know.
Yeah,
So, oh, and by the way, as you were on Tennessee, let me throw in a fifth to my Heisman race. Dylan Sampson, that man continues to just get it done. Him and that O line, every time Tennessee needs a spark, Dylan Sampson, really like that kid.
yeah, and I mean it's just going to be a battle here for Georgia because I think the blueprint can kind of be seen now a little bit. If you can stop Georgia's run game and force Carson Beck to throw, which is crazy to say, force a Carson Beck that was a preseason Heisman contender.
Mhm.
You know, if your strategies make him throw the ball as much as possible and you know you're going to get 1 or 2 picks, maybe a third, if you're really lucky, a fourth, that what are we doing here? That Georgia should not be in a position like this. This is the, we've talked about it before, blue blood problems, or Georgia not a blue blood, but definitely in their current era they're on feel like one. You've got to be able to blow teams like Florida out. They were a 14.5 point favorite. They did not cover that. Had half a point difference there, but still, just Georgia, unbelievably weird game from them again.
That it was for sure, Cade.
But one final game to get to, and it's another Florida team, Tyler. It's Miami, a 53-31 win over Duke in a game that I think the win probability chart tells you everything you need to know about this. Comfortable for Miami. Oh my goodness, Duke has a double-digit lead. Okay, Miami won by 20. We're good. Just the weirdest Miami game, maybe in a season full of weird games. Maybe the weirdest one yet for how casual it felt.
Yeah, it was, and we touched on a bit. That second half was wild. You thought, oh my God, Miami's going to slop around. They're going to lose it.
Nope, seems like we lost you there for a
Just,
moment. There you go. Now you're back.
how crazy was it to watch that second half? There we go. Okay, now we're back. Anyways, but yeah, I mean, what a wild game. Thought Miami was going to slop around, lose this one. They were kind of, wouldn't say lifeless, but close, right? And just what a fiery second half that was. That's Cam Ward, man. I swear his team's just in on him on a secret of, hey, let's just mess around and see if we can get you some Heisman moments here. I don't know how to couch that. It's been funny to watch.
I was about to say, are they using the 2018 Oklahoma Kyler Murray strategy of if our defense is
Oh, no.
bad enough, you will have to have 5 touchdowns or more to win this game? We're going to make you win the Heisman because of how bad we played. Congratulations. But I mean, this is a game where Miami was able to come up with 4 turnovers. Their defense had moments, but there's a brief period where, we're thinking, here we go again. Miami's down double digits at home, and they're able to come back within the quarter. They didn't have to take the entire second half this time or make this a battle to the end. It was 31-32 or 32-31. Miami is trying to hold on and just big pass after big pass. You can see it here in the fourth quarter. Jacoby George, 49 yards. Xavier Restrepo, 66 yards. Restrepo, just what a phenomenal game he had. 8 catches for 146 and 3 touchdowns. Cam Ward already talked about it a little bit there with his 400-yard game. This is a Miami offense that we've talked about a lot before. This is not just continuing to find a way to win. In a game like this, this was offensive dominance for the Canes.
Yeah, it was. And that was, I mean, super impressive. Also, the defense. I know you gave up 31 points, but you forced Malik Murphy into some mistakes, and that helped along the way as well. So the chaotic, erratic Miami Hurricanes somehow still undefeated.
Yeah, and dare I say, this is maybe the best they've looked against a non-Florida State ACC team yet. I mean, this was, if you're going to have to be down at double digits at some point, because it just feels like every Miami game is like this now. If you know that point is coming, this is as good as you can feel about a game like that, where you still win by 22 at the end. A odd performance, but still a good performance, to say the absolute least, for Miami in this one, Tyler. But
For sure.
that will wrap things up for week 10 of the college football season, a week that, as we said at the beginning, Tyler, If you would have told me all this was going to happen this week, I'd have said, yeah, that's a funny joke. No, it's not. We're not talking about Texas Tech, Iowa State. That's going to be bad. We're not going to talk about Clemson and Louisville. We're not going to talk about some of these games. It's going to be a blowout. What do you mean? Well, what are you talking about? But this was a week that delivered. And every once in a while, you get a week in college football like this where you get late in the season, teams are really starting to find their groove, or someone you thought was good turns out they really weren't. It's one of those wild times as that playoff push is officially underway. We might see a lot more of this, Tyler.
Yeah, we might. I think you're going to see, I wouldn't say desperation, Cade, but things are going to really ratchet up in terms of the intensity because you've got some teams really trying to make that push for, okay, can I get myself into the conference championship and try to lock up the college football playoff spot? You got some teams trying to claw back. I mean, what a great time of the year. And college football, as always, delivers.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm excited about. You brought up a good point to it as well. Now that we have this 12-team playoff, we have the room is so much more open for a 1 or 2 loss, maybe even a 3-loss team to still maneuver their way. There might be someone, a South Carolina that we're not even talking about right now, that if they can, boom, 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 everything falls in their way, they could rocket up into the top 20 or maybe near the top 15 at the end of the year and be in the playoff consideration, or at least be a team that we somewhat talk about. It's going to be a wild time, and you're not going to want to miss any of it, folks, if you're watching here on the channel. If you've made it this far, we hope you like the video, and if so, if you haven't yet, feel free to hit that like button, hit the notification bell as well to get notified when all new videos come out, after you hit the subscribe button, of course, as well, and leave a comment down below. We'd like to hear, what are your champions of life of the week? Who's your fraud alert? What are some other games you think might be fun to talk about? Or even, just tell us how your team did. We always love to hear it, folks. Just trying to get 8 more subscribers. Just hit that 100 goal, and it will definitely make the year. We got 2 months to do it, Tyler. We've got 2 months, maybe 1 month, 1 to 2. Viewer watching this, you decide. We would sincerely appreciate it. Again, it does not sound like a lot, but it means so much to us.
That it does. Thank you in advance.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you in advance. But folks, until next time, have a good one, everybody.